Welcome to the Mermaid of Padstow, a Cornish folktale. I'm your humble storyteller. A quick thing to note before we begin proper. This is going to seem like it's a love story. It isn't. So just bear that in mind. Where the mouth of the river Camel spits out into the sea, Landwed Hennock, or better known as Padstow, where we lay our scene, the north coast of Cornwall, treacherous rocks and savage tides, the bane of many a ship. But Padstow is where safe harbour lies, and up on higher street, saviours, Tristram Bird steps out his house and walks the cobbled streets down into Padstow town. Lie, la, lie, lie, la, lie, la, lie, 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 lie, la, lie. Harbour side, the streets are alive with traded goods. Iron from Russia, wine from France, from Norway and Sweden, construction wood. Bachelor Tristram Bird looks out past the harbour, takes a breath in, fills his lungs with the salty air, tastes that tang of copper and tin, and oh, the sound of seabird cries come floating down on the wind. The voice of sailors who sing along to filthy songs while getting drunk at the Golden Lion Inn. Lie, la, lie, lie, la, lie, la, lie, 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 lie, la, lie. Lie, la, lie, 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 lie. And scores of fishermen unloading the nets full of money they've caught. Another beautiful day in this Cornish trading port. Lie, la, lie, lie, la, lie, la, lie, 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 lie, la, lie. It was a beautiful, sunny day in Padstow. The skies were blue and clear. The sea was calm. Which should tell you almost immediately that this story takes place in a fantasy world, because that kind of day does not exist in Cornwall. All of those things individually, maybe. All at the same time, not likely. I know it's how the Cornish sell it. The tourist board and travel agents, which apparently still exist, they're all in on it too. They're all like, come to Cornwall for the glorious golden beaches and azure seas. You could be in the Mediterranean. You should be in the Mediterranean. It's warmer. Go there. You could be in the Mediterranean. All right, fine. You know what? You could be in the Mediterranean, but only if, in the Mediterranean, it's constantly raining and it's always windy as fuck. But it's fine. This is a folk tale. It's a story. We can allow for some poetic license. So, it was a beautiful, sunny day in Padstow. The skies were blue and clear. The sea was calm. Padstow, at this time, is a prosperous trading port because it's one of the few safe harbours on the dreaded Cornish coast. For any of you that don't know, the Cornish coast is notoriously horrific to navigate, featuring sharp rocks, swirling tides and strong winds. Padstow is a safe harbour for two main reasons. The first is that the river it's on, the River Camel, is very deep. This means that even at relatively low tide, ships can still sail in and out. The second is that the mouth of the river is flanked by high cliffs, meaning the barrage of strong winds that ships have to endure out on the sea drops almost immediately when they enter the river. Ships then just have a nice little float down to the harbour. So, here we are in Padstow. Tristram Bird, who we met earlier in that rousing intro song, steps out of his house, gazes at the clear blue sky, makes absolutely no comment about it being unusual, and heads into town. Tristram is a handsome young chap in his early 20s, about 6'3", and he actually owns this small house on Higher Street, Saviours, so he is considered locally to be an eligible bachelor. I'm not saying he's Brad Pitt, or contemporary reference. I'm just saying he's considered an eligible bachelor in an era and place where there's not really that many around. Why is Tristram Bird heading into town, you might well ask? Well, he's bought a brand new gun, and he's keen to show it off. Like you do. So on the way, he's shooting at birds and little mice he sees, laughing away jovially, enjoying himself immensely. It's not the greatest intro to one of the two leading characters in your story, I will admit that, cackling maniacally as he blasts cute little creatures into oblivion, but I'm compelled to tell this story honestly. And honestly, this is how it starts. As Tristram is walking through town, he's pausing along the way to say hello to various of the town's inhabitants, including some of Padstow's fair maidens, who stop to chat to the only eligible bachelor around. But they leave after a few minutes because their delicate, feminine stomachs just can't handle a man going about his manly business of extinguishing tiny lives. Again, what a guy. So, off they trot, and Tristram, relatively unconcerned, heads down to the sea. It's a gorgeous walk from Padstow Harbour to Hawker's Cove, hugging the left side of the river. At anything other than high tide, the east and west banks have beautiful sandy beaches. Tiny villages dot the valley on both sides, and the cliffs, where the river meets the sea, stretch out before you. Tristram wanders along the beach, making boot prints in the wet sand. It's that kind of hard-packed sand that's firm but sinks ever so slightly. But when you lift your foot, after a few seconds, the footprint just disappears. Almost as if you were never really there. The beach is empty this day. which is another real-life inconsistency. An empty beach on a sunny day in Cornwall? I don't think so. But we're moving on. The beach is empty this day. Which means it's strange when Tristram, looking up from where his last bootprint has vanished from existence, notices a figure sitting on the rocks over yonder. Means over there. This is our mermaid. A couple of things to note. In the written version of the tale, our mermaid doesn't actually have a name, which I don't really think is on. If Tristram Birdkiller Bird gets a name, so should our mermaid. So I did some research and came across the Cornish name Mavoren, which I really like. So that's what we'll call her. Mavoren. And if any of you are sat there thinking, ooh, I wonder what Mavoren means in Cornish. Mermaid. I didn't do loads of research. The second thing to note is that Tristram doesn't know she's a mermaid. All he can see thus far is a pretty young maiden turned slightly away from him with, presumably, her feet dangling in the rock pool in front of her, which, appropriately enough, is known as the Mermaid's Glass. And pretty she is, Tristram observes immediately, because of course he does. With beautiful long hair the colour of oats waiting for the sickle tumbling down her back, and a graceful form, which is just a fancy way of saying a hot bod. Tristram is, in his own words, bewitched. He approaches her cautiously. He gives a little cough to announce his presence. She turns, and Tristram beholds the full splendour of her face, sweet red lips and eyes, the colour and depth of the sea itself. He feels he might drown in them, and would be happy to do so. And all of this framed by a cascade of curls. Tristram moistens his lips and swallows. His mouth very dry all of a sudden. He needs to think of something charming to say, something witty, something erudite. This opening sentence needs to impress her so much that she will fall in love with him instantly. His mind is racing. She's looking at him, curious, a half smile playing on her lips, but Tristram is now aware that too much time has passed. He's not said anything yet. He's sort of just staring at her. He needs to say something, so he screws up his courage, and the first words he utters to Mavoren are, "Doing your toilet out in the open?" Because apparently flirting was different back then. Less, "Hi, how you doing? Can I buy you a drink?" And more, "Pissing outside, is it?" It's not the best opener, granted, but Mavoren doesn't seem particularly offended. She does a tinkling little laugh and turns back to the mermaid's glass, combing her hair with a sea-green comb. So, this next song is Tristram's wooing song, by which I don't mean he goes woo a lot in it. It's his courting song. It's the song where he's trying to convince Mavoren to marry him, and as you'll see, it doesn't go great. Beautiful maiden, I love ye with all my soul. I know this, 'cause my heart told me so, and it's plain to see. You've bewitched me, sweet. All I ask is a union for the rest of our lives. I love you and want you to wife. Say you'll marry me.
No, I will
together to live with me and my mum. Say you'll marry me.
No, I will never marry you. Random guy, you flatter me, sort of. You don't take a man of your breed. Long to fall in love, and sad for me. I'm wedded to the sea.
Say you'll marry me.
No, I will never marry you.
Say you'll marry me.
No, I will never marry you.
I know I don't even have a ring, but a lock of your hair I could make one with. Say you'll marry me.
No, I will never marry you.
Beautiful vixen, it's strange to refuse an upstanding bachelor's proposal to you. There's plenty of maids who would marry me today. Say you'll marry me.
No, I will never marry you.
Say you'll marry me.
No, I will never marry you.
Asking for your hair was a little bit weird. Would it help if I gave you a chunk of my beard? Say you'll marry me.
No, I will never marry you.
This back and forth goes on for quite some time. Mavoren says,
If there's other women that want to marry you, why not axe them?
and Tristram's like, well, I don't want to axe them, I love you. At a certain point, Tristram ends up describing the contents of his house. Always a winner, with women reticent to marry you. But to this, Mavoren responds,
I would not marry you if you were decked in diamonds and your house a golden house and everything in it made of jewels and set in gold.
which is a pretty emphatic no. So, he shoots her. Forgot he had a gun, didn't you? He takes a step towards her, eyes blazing. If I can't have you living, I'll have you dead. And he shoots her. Now, I said at the start that this isn't a love story. We've got an entitled guy who thinks he's God's gift because he's literally the only marriable chap around, and he's just been rejected. What did we think was going to happen? Because, you know, men, notoriously magnanimous when it comes to romantic rejection. He shoots her. Mavoren was minding her own business. She wasn't luring, she wasn't enchanting, she wasn't trying to drag him out to sea. She was just sat on some rocks, brushing her hair, thinking about anything. Could be anything. He shoots her. She sat with her tail in the rock pool, with her back to Tristram, but her face turned towards him during their brief interaction. The bullet passes through her side and splashes into the mermaid's glass in front of her, the ripples it causes distorting her reflection, creating broken images of her face as she instantaneously experiences myriad emotions. Shock, pain, fear, anger. She gasps, slumps forward, rolls onto her back, and in doing so reveals to Tristram the long, fish-like tail that had previously been hidden in the rock pool. Now, in the written version of this tale, it's at this point that Tristram understands he's committed a wicked deed. I mean, 10 seconds ago, when he thought he'd just shot some random woman, he was fine with it, but now she's a mermaid, now it's a wicked deed. But, regardless of Tristram's obvious lack of empathy, he does have good reason to be regretful of his actions towards Mavoren. The daughters of Poseidon are magical creatures, and are not known for their restraint when it comes to punishing wicked deeds. So, I said, this isn't a love story. And it isn't. And it doesn't exactly get happier from this moment on. But if it helps, it does get way more vengeance-y. The sky was corrupted by jet black clouds, a freezing wind breathed in from the sea, a crack of thunder echoed round the cove, and driving rain from the heavens poured down. The mermaid's glass began to overflow, leaking crimson tears down onto the sand. Like skeletal fingers, the rivulets began snaking across the ground. As Tristram turned and ran, even amidst the swirling winds and roiling seas, Mavoren's voice, as if right beside his ear, could be heard, seething.
With my dying breath, I curse you, Tristram bird, and all who reside in the once safe harbour of Lanwed Hennock. It shall be cursed with a bar of sand that shall stretch from this mermaid's glass to Trebethic Bay on the opposite shore. It shall be a bar of doom to any ship that tries to enter this haven of deep water. The mermaid's wraith shall haunt this bar of doom, and the sea shall claim all, Tristram bird, until your wicked deed is fully avenged.
The river's water had parted to reveal the river's mouth, filling with sand, and from Hawker's Cove to the opposite shore, a golden barrier, the Doom Bar. Tristram watches on in horror as the Doom Bar of Padstow is created. A bar of sand the same colour as Mavoren's hair that blocks the river's mouth. He sprints back to his house on Higher Street Saviours, tears open the door and locks himself inside, while the harbour town endures the worst storm in living memory. The storm rages for 2 nights and 2 days, and when it finally abates, the inhabitants of the town venture out to see the damage it has wrought. And a tragic sight they behold. Surrounding the golden bar of sand are the masts and spars of wrecked ships, and the floating bodies of drowned men. The waves are still crashing down on the Doom Bar, and as this sound reaches the gathering crowd, a distressful cry like that of a woman bewailing the dead can be heard. The gathered crowd looks down to the Doom Bar with fear and dread in their eyes, seeing nothing but the dead bodies of sailors and their broken ships. As Mavoren promised, from this point on, Padstow is no longer a safe harbour. The Doom Bar makes the river practically inaccessible except at high tide, and that sudden drop in wind due to the high cliffs now means that sailing ships don't have the strong winds needed to change direction quickly. Meaning over the centuries, many ships have been beached, capsized and wrecked, and many, many people have lost their lives to the Doom Bar. Padstow lost its ability to provide a safe harbour, and so lost its prosperity. And what of Tristram? Tristram Bird, the causer of all this mayhem and misery? Well, naturally, after the creation of the Doom Bar, people start asking questions. What's happened? How did this occur? And interestingly, whenever anyone asks Tristram, he always responds, "It is the Bar of Doom, brought there by the fearful curse of the Maid of the Sea whom I shot with my brand new gun." Which is a bit weird, don't you think? I don't know about you, but if I'd shot someone and simultaneously brought about the financial ruin of an entire town, I might not advertise it quite so readily. But you see, this is also part of the mermaid's curse. With the Doom Bar, she curses Padstow, but Tristram is cursed to tell the truth of this sad tale, and his role in it for all to hear. After the events of this story, he travels far and wide over many, many years, by the mermaid's magic compelled to tell this story over and over and over again, until his wicked deed is fully avenged. And what of Mavoren? It is her tale, after all. Well, some say she's buried beneath the doom bar of Padstow, and there she shall remain, her voice haunting the waves, bewailing the drowned. Others say, and I like to think, that she, of the sea created, to the sea returned, naught but ripples left in her wake. And more of egress, then more of dwellers, Salmanus kriech geses driv them. And more of egress, then more of dwellers, Salmanus kriech geses driv them. Geses driv them. Geses driv them. And that is the story of the Mermaid of Padstow. I hope you enjoyed it. I do have one more song for you, just so we don't end on that dour note. And handily, this song summarises the whole show, so if you've not been paying any attention for the last 25-30 minutes, then this is really going to help. A young man walking to Hawker's Cove, out on the rocks spies a maiden he doesn't know. Into the rock pool she stares, combing her golden hair. It's the same old story. Young man meets beauty, infatuated quickly, It's the same old story. So with heart in mouth and with open arms, down on one knee he cries, "Will you marry me?" She turns her head and looks at him and says, "Young men fall in love so easily." Oh, eh, oh, eh, oh. She tells him no, eh, oh, eh, oh. She tells him no. Man reels, angered by her slight. "I'll have you dead if I can't have you alive." He shoots her and she goes pale, falls, reveals her mermaid's tale. It's the same old story. Entitlement breeds misery. A life taken so easily. It's the same old story. With her dying breath, she curses him. A storm hits the town as the sea takes vengeance. She flicks her tail, makes a bar of sand, from coast to coast so that ships run aground. Oh, eh, oh, eh, oh. Oh, eh, oh, eh, oh. It's the same old story. The same old tragedy. And we'll all return to the sea. It's the same old story. With the doom bar sounds and the crashing waves, when ships come to Padstow, they can't be saved. And on the wind, if you listen well, hear the voice of the Mermaid of Padstow.